What's up, everybody? Brian Goulet here of gouletpens.com, and it's episode number 257 of Goulet Q&A. It's middle of June 2019. Man, like half the year is gone. What in the world is going on? But got a good Q&A for you today. Today I'm going to be talking a lot about ink. Just a lot of ink questions came in. Some good ones, so I'm going to talk a little bit about those. Of course, I have some pens to show too, but we're going to get into that. So, had Father's Day this past weekend. It was a lot of fun. Don't make a huge deal out of Father's Day, just like I'm sure most fathers don't. But I got to hang out with my dad, my kids, and all that. So it was, kind of a low-key, nice family day. But the day before that, I was like mowing the lawn, fixing stuff around the house, which is kind of the stuff that I enjoy doing at home in my downtime. So it worked out pretty well for me. So I hope if you were a father, that you had a good Father's Day this past weekend too. Some things that are going around here around the office. We had the Lamy Safari USA pen launch, which we've talked about a little bit. We did a right now on it, so I won't get into it too much. We got the fountain and rollerball, first USA exclusive with Lamy, so that's pretty cool. Whether you love or hate this design, it is the first, so that's kind of cool. What else we got? The Visconti Divina Macchina, a limited edition. I don't have it with me because it's huge, but I think Drew and I might try and do it right now on that next week. Especially just the presentation of it is just so awesome. Very cool, Da Vinci themed, but it's pretty neat. So we got that in. We have a new summer premiere, which is Limelight, and we talked about that in Right Now on Wednesday. So got that available. We're not going to have a whole ton of them. So if you are very interested, you're going to want to move faster on this one, or you might absolutely hate it. We're going like polars on these pens lately. It's like not a lot of middle ground on some of these. But anyway, what else we got? We got another pen that I am actually pretty pumped about. So this is a pen from Platinum, which comes in this cool kind of like rice paper looking box. Comes in a nice wood box, and this is the Kanazawa Haku Matsutora. And it's a style of pen that we haven't really had. This is a Maki pen, and it's very cool. It's got this, let me get the focus on here. Boom. Okay, so it's got tiger, it's got Japanese pine tree on here. Oh, it keeps going on my face. There you go. It's this beautiful gold satin finish, and it's a very light pen. It's kind of like a 3776 style pen, and it's got a 14 karat gold nib on it, and it's $384. So not too shabby in terms of getting something with artwork like this. So if you're into this kind of thing, if you like the theming, I don't know if you're into like a solid gold looking pen, but it's pretty cool, and it's pretty light. It's obviously over top of some kind of resin, so it's not a super, super heavy pen. But it looks really gorgeous, and I'm totally digging it. So there is that. So I'm pretty pumped about that because we've been waiting for that for a little bit. It's cool to see some new stuff coming out from Platinum there. We also have something kind of cool, the Visconti Homo sapiens in the Bronze Age. We got a special batch of them with medium nibs that we had Mark Bacchus of nibgrinder.com grind down to his CSI grind. So it's a cursive smooth italic is what that stands for, and it's basically a little crisper than a stub, but not quite as crisp as a cursive italic. It's kind of somewhere in between there, so it should give really good line variation, but also be very smooth to write with. So that's a grind that he has been doing for a while, and has kind of dubbed it that. So we had him do up a batch of those. I don't know if we're going to have more batches in the future. I would hope so. A lot of it depends on how popular it is and all that. But anyway, so if you're interested in that, we haven't done anything like this before. So it's the first time we've offered, basically a custom grind from anybody. So, but we've been working with Mark for a while, sending a lot of people his way. Basically, anybody who has custom grind recommendations, we kind of send them his way. So he kind of wanted to collaborate with us and do a little thank you. So we got one batch of this, testing it out, see how it goes. So if you end up getting one of those, please give us feedback on how you like it, because I'm very curious to see. So there's that. So that's pretty cool. Retro 51 has announced another rollerball popper pen, which I don't have with me to show, but it is police themed. So sort of like they had the Engine 37 before for firefighters. This is police themed, and it's called the Shield, and it looks pretty cool. So we've got that up on our site. I think we may have launched it by the time we see this video, but if you are interested in that, we got, an okay stock of them. So these poppers tend to go pretty fast. Ours usually don't blow out in like a couple hours, but they don't hang around that long. So if you're interested, go pick one up now, please. And then we also have a new, no, this is a pen that I want to show you later on. That's the Montegrappa Amaralio, which is pretty cool. And I'm going to show you that in a bit because I have a talk about it in the question. I was like, what? I got all these pens laying out on my desk, and I'm like, okay, what are these for? And then we have lots of summer sales, so be sure to check those out on the site. We're going to be rolling through things, kind of changing them almost pretty much every week. If you're on our email newsletter list, then you're going to see a lot of those too. So I recommend signing up for that newsletter list. If you're interested in some of the sales, we're going to be testing out some stuff with some free shipping. We're going to be testing out some stuff with different brand deals and other things, overstock that we have. Really just trying to, we're slower in the summertime, trying to make some things exciting for you. And then we have stock that's like, maybe that before we get back into the holiday season this year that we want to free up a little bit. So we're giving you some extra deals. So check those out. All right, let's get into the questions for this week, shall we? I only have one pen and writing question, which is weird, and then like 5 ink questions. Very disproportionate, this Q&A, but that's okay. So we're going heavy on the ink theme. So first question I have is the pen and writing from pravek.sinha on Instagram. I'm thinking of upgrading from my Lamy 2000. What are my options? Okay, so let me start off by saying the Lamy 2000 is a pretty awesome pen to begin with. A lot of people, that's their grail pen, and they park it there and they say, yep, I'm good. No need to go up from here. Of course, like any niche hobby like this, you can pretty much go up as high as you want. But, that Lamy 2000 pen is a great pen in its own right. It's not like it has to be a stepping stone for anything. So I just got that out of the way. But that said, there are some, upgrades that you can consider. Once you get into pens that are like gold nibs and getting up into higher into the hundreds and maybe even thousands of dollars, it's going to be extremely subjective what's considered an upgrade and what's not. It's kind of universal that a lot of people think that once you get into piston filling mechanisms or vacuum filling mechanisms, gold nibs, maybe some certain types of materials for either increased durability or beauty, those are kind of universally accepted as upgrades, if you will. Everybody's got an opinion, but that's kind of well understood. Once you get into some of those other things, it becomes really subjective. So getting into like the Lamy 2000 range on up, it could be really debatable. So these are some of my opinions, and I'm going to take it a couple different routes. So first off, within the Lamy, you have the Dialogue 3, which I realize I forgot to grab, and the Emporium. The Dialogue 3 is the one that's retractable nib, and then you have the Emporium. They're kind of different than the Lamy 2000. I don't know if I would necessarily call them an upgrade, depending on what it is that you find that you want to be different than the Lamy 2000, certainly in price and some of the mechanisms, like the Dialogue 3 is retractable, and that's just got a cool factor, is a nice engineering factor to it that you may find more appealing. You may like the springiness of those nibs, the 14-karat nibs that come on the Dialogue 3 or the Emporium. You might like that a little better than the relatively stiff Lamy 2000 nib. You could consider that an upgrade. But both of those are also a cartridge converter, so you're going from a piston to a cartridge converter. So it's kind of debatable whether those are considered upgrades, but they are more premium priced pens within the Lamy line. So got to give those a mention. Other things that we have going outside of that brand, I think if you wanted to go with something like a Pelican, still German, still kind of keeping in that same style and theme, this is a special edition. This is the white and turquoise. You're going into something that looks a little dressier, I guess. The Lamy 2000's Bauhaus is very kind of straightforward, form over function, function over form. Whoops. So this, you're getting a little more into kind of the, call it professional looking or corporate looking, whatever it is. But you're getting into more of like a dress attire here, as opposed to your, whatever it is that the Lamy 2000 you would consider it to be. I was going to say overalls, but I was like, that's probably a little too downgraded from where that is. But anyway, so you just can get a little fancier, the M600, 800, 1000, something like that. That I think could probably be considered pretty universally an upgrade perhaps from that. The Pilot Custom 823, love this pen, very popular. Has higher ink capacity, it's got the vacuum filler. It's good for traveling because that vacuum filler can actually lock off the ink in here, so there's some practicality there. It's a demo. You can see the ink inside. I think that's an upgrade, maybe not. I don't know. It's not really an upgrade yet. It's good or bad otherwise, but it is kind of a neat feature that you get. And then the nib is bigger, it just presents a little fancier. And then the nib itself is a little springier than the Lamy 2000, which I think has a nice writing feel to it. So, that's all debatable, but I would think that could be probably thrown in there. Keeping in line with Pilot, I think you could go, a regular vanishing point, you could debate whether that's an upgrade or not, but you can get some of the Rodin vanishing points. So these definitely are getting more into an artistic, definitely kind of more of a design theme. This one is the stripe. There's a water surface, and you get the click retractability of it, which may or may not be to your liking, but it's really more the aesthetics of it, the Rodin mother of pearl that gets in there, not mother of pearl, abalone shell that gets in there. Those get pretty fancy looking. Visconti Homo sapiens, have to mention that one. It's made of lava. Didn't know if you knew that, but very cool pen. I use this one a lot myself. Very durable. Not that the Lamy 2000 is also very durable, so I don't know if that's considered an upgrade or not. It's got the it's got the vacuum filling, or the power filler as Visconti calls it. It's got definitely a springier nib with that palladium on here. Bigger nib. The hook safe lock is pretty cool, but also Lamy 2000 is pretty darn practical too. So, that's debatable how much better maybe this one is than the other one, but the cool factor is pretty awesome, and the bronze look and all that. It looks pretty cool. So I would probably classify that one in there too. And then getting into some of the fancier materials as well, like some of the celluloids that you get, especially with the Italian pens. They do more in the celluloids. Celluloid is a material that's not being made very much anymore, if at all, so it's hard to get a hold of. So you're going to see them in fancier and fancier pens. So we got our Stipula Etruria Alter Ego that we still have some of these left. It's one run and then it's done. So that material is pretty awesome. Gold nibs, again, kind of springier nibs going on there too. And then this is another celluloid that we have right now. This is the Montegrappa Admiral, which I don't know if I've ever shown you the presentation of this. I can't remember. I remember explicitly going over it with Drew at some point, but I think that might have been off camera. But anyway, it comes in this really slick looking box. I'm going to take the box out of here and show you what it looks like inside. Okay, stuff. So there you go. It's got a space for the bottle, which they actually include separately in here. This is like a $1,600 pen, so it gets up there, but then the pen is resting nicely in there, and I'll pull it out of here. Beautiful material here. So it's a nice resin. This one has a Sailor nib on it, which is a collaboration that they've done with Sailor. Granted, it looks Montegrappa, so it doesn't say Sailor. Let me see if I can get you a screen grab of this. Nice looking nib. They've done a really good job with this. And then to show you kind of what the material looks like. It's like boom. So it just kind of will punch you in the face with some of that shimmer as you're turning the pen. But it looks really, really cool in person. So they're going to have a couple different colors of this. Not a lot of these pens around, but if you are interested, that's an option too. So you get into some of this more interesting stuff as you get higher up in there. Getting some of these celluloids, that's an example of the kind of things you can get into when you go maybe beyond the Lamy 2000. And that's kind of what I've got. Oh, okay, one more. So if you wanted to get into more design stuff, you can get into Maki pens, Rodin pens. I talked about that a little bit with the Pilot Vanishing Point there, or the Namiki. I guess it's Namiki Vanishing Point at that point. But anyway, this is a Namiki. This is the Yukari Nightline Moonlight. Very cool, very fancy pen, and they have all Rodin ones like this, but most of them have some other form of Maki. So getting into that, certainly you're getting much more into the design elements and the artistry, apart from just the practicality of the Lamy 2000. All these are great pens. They all get me very excited, and I think that they're all worth a look if you are feeling so inclined to go above and beyond there. All right, now we got a bunch of ink questions, starting with Sarah S. on YouTube. With the rise of pastel color pens, do you think more pastel but readable inks will be the new thing? Think of blue myotis, rose gilt, barossa grape, Yeah, for me, yeah, to a degree, I think that, you know, for sure, there's going to be an increase in demand of these types of inks, as there are these types of pens that are gaining some popularity. Certainly, pastels in general are gaining popularity just in the fashion world in general. Not that I am one to really speak much on that because I don't have much of a fashion sense at all. After all, I am wearing a t-shirt from a restaurant in Atlanta that you may have heard of. If you've ever been there, it's pretty good. You should get their orange milkshakes. But anyway, orange cream, I think they're called. Anyway, really good. It's basically like drinking a creamsicle. But anyway, so I'm not super like fashion oriented. You know, certainly there's some correlation maybe to what goes on in the pen world and what goes on in like the greater, you know, fashion world in general. But I don't know how much of a correlation there is, to be quite honest with you. I think, you know, as people are matching these inks to their pens, there's going to be some increase, but I am not seeing like a groundswell change of priority, at least in the US, of people swinging away from the bright, vibrant, sheening, shimmering kind of inks that have been popular for the last, I don't know, 10 years. I'm not seeing that turning on its head right now. I mean, pastels, excuse me, are certainly going to be a little more popular, but it's not like I'm seeing it flip, you know, opposites, right? So it's always hard to predict the future. I don't know that that's going to be the case. Certainly tastes could change in the pen world and in people's minds. You know, I do think there's something nice about having a more subdued ink color, something that doesn't, you know, punch you in the eyes as much as some of these bright and vibrant colors do. But also just thinking practically about the type of people that are using fountain pens these days, especially in the US, is people that are doing it to be kind of different and to make themselves, you know, stand out and have something interesting going on in their own writing. I don't think they're going for subtlety necessarily. I think they're going for something a little more vibrant and exciting, and that's probably only going to continue as you know, fountain pens become more and more niche as time goes on. So my prediction is that in the foreseeable future, you're not going to see pastel type inks be more popular than anything else. But I think there's probably going to be people that are into it, and there may be some that come out there, and that's cool. All right. clbdroid on Instagram says, you've mentioned before that inks have a pretty long shelf life. Is that also true for inks with scent, shimmer, or sheening effects added? Do they require any different storage or maintenance? Thanks to you and your team for all you do for we fountain pen nerds. You're welcome, Droid. Okay, good question. You know, it's kind of hard to say for sure because some of these inks haven't been around all that long. The sheening inks probably have been around the longest out of this group that you're kind of mentioning here. And maybe some of the scents, but I'm not sure. The scented inks are not wildly popular anyway, but there's a few of them out there maybe. I think scents are the ones that would be, if I had to be most like eyebrow raising towards any of these groups, the scents are the ones that I would think would not hang around and not last as long as the others. Again, I have no real data to go off of for how long they'll last, but that just to me, I think scents in general are just not going to stay as potent for as long of a period of time. I could be completely wrong about that, but I think that's probably the case. Going with, you know, sheening or shimmering inks, I think, you know, most of the sheening inks that I've seen that are a little older haven't changed really much any different than any other particular ink. And I could be wrong about that, like maybe over the period of 2 or 3 decades, you know, but I think that you're gonna want to have just basic kind of ink storage, you know, hygiene or habits for any of these inks. And then you're going to see kind of similar results. So, you know, store them in a cool, dark place, out of sunlight. Make sure the cap is tightly sealed so it doesn't have air exposure and evaporation, stuff like that. Obviously, if it's in like a glass or a plastic bottle, that's going to matter. So there's some context there. How often you open it and dipping your pen in and out could be a factor as well. So there's a few different things going on here. But I think in general, you know, you basically don't have to do anything different that I'm aware of with any of your ink. Other than some of these basic kind of things. The shimmer stuff, you know, I don't think it's going to have like any kind of reaction. It's basically like particulate that's in the bottle. Really, I think like pretty much any ink, however it's formulated, if it's okay after like 6 or 12 months sitting on the shelf, it's probably okay for a good 10 years, you know, because any type of reaction that you would happen over a matter of months if it was going to happen. I really haven't seen any that have been fine for 5 years and then they do something crazy. I think you're going to see that more on the sooner end if it's going to do anything nuts. So, you know, again, I could be wrong, and maybe if you have experience that's a little different, that could be interesting to hear about. But in general, I think you're going to be okay just treating most of your inks with the same kind of basic storage habits. All right, Hector is Segura on 818 on Instagram says, X-Feather Blue rumor. Is there any weight to it? At least put on your tinfoil hat and talk a little about what that would mean. Okay, so Noodler's X-Feather is a black ink that is made to be anti-feathering. It's not 100% foolproof on all papers, of course, but it was designed to work well, especially on things like newsprint and things that are like otherwise quite absorbent. You know, your mileage may vary on these things, of course, but I've been hearing requests for years about getting X-Feather in other colors because that's one of the things, especially with people who are based out of the US, our paper is terrible. Basically all the paper that we carry here in our store comes from either Europe or Japan. And so the paper quality there is significantly better. So you're gonna get a, you know, less feathering on those types of papers. But here, if you're using, if I just, you know, go into any office here in, you know, America, and I pull a sheet of paper out of the printer and start writing on it, it's gonna feather quite a bit. So an ink to combat that seems very appealing. Noodler's X-Feather, of course, with its name, is gonna get some attention there. People have been asking, can you make a blue? Can you make a purple? Can you make a green? Whatever. And from what I understand talking to Nathan, with the dye components that are in that ink, you can only make it black. So it's just black dye, and you know, the way that he makes it, he can't do any other colors. And so I've talked to him about this. He's aware of the demand, asked about it, and I was like, can you do it? And he's basically like, there is no other dye in any other color family that will do the same things that X-Feather will do. And I trust him that he's tested a lot of them. Now that said, I didn't ask him this yesterday. You know, this was a little while ago, so it's possible that he could have discovered something that he didn't know about before, or that didn't exist before, and there could be something X-Feathery that comes out. It's in a different color, but I have not heard of this in any official capacity. So I think any rumors that are out there are unsubstantiated, at least from my perspective. And I don't have any reason to believe that it's on the way or coming soon or anything. That said, I could get an email this afternoon that says, hey, guess what's coming? But as of right now, I do not know that is the case. So sorry to burst your bubble there, but you know, this is how rumors get started. Anyway, I think it's not valid at this point. All right, Moby Prof on Twitter asks, what are some of the shading-est blue inks out there? Love Noodler's blue and Iroshizuku Asa-Gao, but would like to try something with more variation while I write. Cool. There's a lot of them. I'm going to list some of them here, but certainly like ink samples are the way to go if you want to test out different blue inks. Using them on Tomoe River paper is some of like the best shading paper that's ever been out there, but Rodeo and Clairefontaine will do okay too. And then using them in a broader, wetter nib, flex nibs do great, stubs often do okay, but something like a medium or broad is going to get you your best shading capabilities. Just in general, for those of you who want inks to shade, that's how you get the most out of it. But we do have a place on our site for shading inks. Granted, we don't have an exhaustive list on there. We got a few blues listed. I think it's only like 20 inks that we've listed on there for ones that are like really known for shading well. Other ones are a little more subjective. So I'll get into some of the more subjective ones, and this is purely just my opinion about what I think is good, and then you can take it from there. So I'm gonna lay it out right now to say I'm sticking really kind of narrowly within the blue range. There are a couple of turquoises I could get into, Diamond Marine, Lamy Turquoise. I'm not gonna quite go there. And then I'm gonna stay away from ones that really just have a heavy sheen, but just be aware that that is something that you could also look into to change up your color variation. Going with something like a Diamine Majestic Blue or an Organic Studio Nitrogen could get you some color variation that's not technically shading, it's more sheen. But I just want to mention those kind of casually, but that's it, I'm not going to get deeper into those. I'll stick purely with shading because that's what you asked me. So for me, one of the inks that I love using the most is Robert Oster Blue Water Ice. It's a good one. It does also have a little bit of a sheen to it, especially on Tomoe, but it does have really good shading properties, and it's nice solid blue. Robert Oster Blue Moon is another one. Actually, there's a lot of Robert Oster blues that shade pretty well. It's one of the things they're really known for. You mentioned Noodler's Blue Eel as well. It's the lubricated version of Noodler's Blue. That would get into that category too. Both really good shaders. You mentioned Pilot Iroshizuku Asa-Gao. I also have to mention Konpeki and Amairo as two other ones that are really good shaders too. Kujaku gets a little bit into the turquoisey kind of thing, but there are some good shading properties there. Another really good shader is Noodler's Navajo Turquoise. Really nice blue color. I know it says Navajo Turquoise, it's super on the blue side. There's almost no green to it at all. So I'm okay putting that into the blue category. And then another one I threw in here was J. Herbin Blue Nuit. It's kind of a dark horse in this whole race here. It's a little bit on the darker side of blue, but J. Herbin's inks tend to be just a little more watery, some of their colors, which can bring out the shading. And that leads me into talking about if you wanted to experiment a little bit, take some of the blues you already have, you could water them down a little bit and increase the shading capabilities of them yourself. I would do it in small capacities, and if you want to be, proper about doing it, you want to use distilled water so you don't have any like hard minerals or anything that could react with anything and you do something crazy. I don't know how your local water is, but using distilled water is the safest way to go and what ink makers would tell you to use. But you could do that. So dilute it maybe 10%, 25%, up to 50% if you really want to get change the properties of it. You can test out different things. Try and do it in a small sample vial, like a milliliter or two at a time, so you're not wasting the whole bottle and then you've ruined it and then you're going to be mad at me. But do small quantities and you can test it out. But any of the ones that I mentioned here I think are going to be pretty solid shaders for you, and I hope you enjoy them. All right, troubleshooting questions. I'm going to close out here with two of those. So one is from the 11vixen on Instagram. I've been having problems with traces of ink remaining in my cartridge pen after thorough flushing. Several ear bulbs worth of water, flushing another 10 milliliters or so after it seems clean. Wiping the nib on a kitchen tissue and letting the tissue wick the water out so it comes clean. But the moment I re-ink the pen, it writes with the old ink for maybe a quarter of an inch or less before starting on the new ink. I know different inks can react with each other, so obviously I don't want to risk the health of my pen to this issue if I can help it. Is there some way of ensuring this doesn't happen short of refilling an empty cartridge with distilled water and writing with that, which is basically the only solution I can think of that I haven't tried? You don't need to go quite that far, especially with distilled water. You don't need to go that far. So for the amount of ink that you're talking about, if you literally a quarter of an inch, like that much with the old color, there's not much ink in there if that's the case, especially if it's all watered down and stuff. There's such a tiny amount of ink in there, it's probably not going to have any kind of reaction whatsoever with anything. But, if you want to be completely due diligent about it, I understand. And you should, try and clean it out as thoroughly as you can. Sounds like you're cleaning it out more thoroughly than probably most people are already, but if you want to do it even a step further, I do a couple of recommendations for you. So I think what's happening here, just to explain it, and I'm going to grab, what have I got here? I got a TWSBI 580 ALR purple, right? No, that's not a cartridge pen. I should grab a cartridge pen. Let's go with Edison Nouveau Premier. Okay, so this is a cartridge converter pen. So you're using your bulb syringe, which I'll go ahead and pull mine out. Ta-da! So what you're doing when you're flushing the bulb syringe, what's happening? So the water, like electricity, is going to take the path of least resistance. So what's happening is when you're forcing the bulb syringe to flush through the back of your pen, it is going to just flood it with water and it's going to clean it really, really well. Maybe not to perfection, but that's okay. It's flushing a lot of water through here. The first place that the water is going to go is through the filler hole, which is back here. Where the water is actually feeding down through, and I'll take it apart so I can show you, when your pen is drawing ink up from the ink reservoir, which in this case would be a cartridge or a converter, it's coming down this very narrow channel all the way in the feed. Look at this tiny, tiny little channel. And then coming up, and then it's going to the nib, which the nib goes onto the back of the feed like that. It's going through this tiny slit on the nib, and then it's going to your paper, okay? And it's meant to be very, very controlled, because if it is too tight and too narrow, it's not going to have proper capillary action. It's not going to flow through your pen. If it's too wide open, then it's just going to gush out and blob all over the page. So it has to be very, very precise in terms of how much ink is flowing through there. Well, that is going to take you absolutely forever to fill your pen if you are filling through a channel that small when you actually fill it. So where it actually fills from is this channel here on the bottom. So on the bottom, you can see that kind of like big chunk that's taken out there. That is the filler. So that's where the ink is flowing into the pen. And there's a proper amount of air after you filled the pen that comes up through that channel that allows the ink to flow down through it. So what you're dealing with here, when you're flushing the pen back through it with a bulb syringe, it's not exactly going through the same place that it does when you are writing with the pen. It's flooding water and it's going all through the thing, and you are forcing some of that water down through the feed channel, but you're going to have very, very clear water running through this thing that cleans out basically the underside of the feed before maybe it's come through kind of the top of the nib, and certainly through that channel that goes all the way through the feed. So you have a couple different options if you really want to clean it thoroughly. You can keep on flushing it with the bulb syringe, and one thing you can do is use more pressure. So what that's going to do is that's going to force the ink to go in more places as it's coming through. So that can help. You just want to be careful not to like blast your nib off your bulb and then have the nib damage in your sink or whatever. But you can do that more and more times, like really like press it good if you're holding it firmly on here. That can help. You can also just do it more times as you do it over and over and over again. That can help. Another thing you can do is you can actually just keep the bulb syringe inked up with water, and you can take your kitchen tissue, as you called it, or paper towel, whatever you want to call it. I always have one here. I'll just take a regular tissue. Whatever you're using, whatever absorbent paper material you're using, you can take that and you can just touch it just with the water in the bulb syringe. You don't have to like press the water through the syringe, but essentially you've got now a giant ink reservoir in the back of your pen. So you can just touch that to it after you've flushed it a couple of times. And just that will help wick the water down through the feed, and that will clear it out. That alone probably would solve your issue. Of course, if you want to take it a step further, you can pull the nib and feed out of your pen if you're feeling comfortable doing that. You don't necessarily need to do that every time you change ink, but it might not be a bad idea if you have something like a Bay State cranberry or something and you're going to change it to a different brand of ink. You may want to go that. If you have an ink that is particularly known for not being mixable with other inks, you may want to go that route. What else have I got? You could try a pen flush. That may or may not be necessary. It depends. That's really better for if you have an ink that's like dried up inside your pen. So if you have a pen that's been sitting around 3 months ago, you inked it up, hasn't written, the ink is all dried up inside of there, then flushing it once or twice with a bulb syringe isn't going to do it. It might need to get a little help. So that's where a pen flush can help and break up that dried stuff. Or you can just take the nib unit like this, drop it in a cup of water, leave it overnight, and that's going to help break down anything that's in there too. So soaking it could be really helpful as well if you have that kind of patience. But I've never heard, for what it's worth, I've never heard of anyone that's even come close to like ruining a pen after being even as thorough as you're already being with their pen, with their cleaning. I've never heard anybody ruining it because of that small amount of ink that you're talking about reacting with anything. So I think your risk is really quite low. And then using the tissue thing to soak it up with some water through it, I think is going to knock out any concerns that you may have. So there you go. And the last question I have for this week is from sugarandsarcasm on Instagram. I love that handle. Recently you talked about TWSBI saying that the white grease on the piston of the AL models should not be removed or mixed with the included silicone grease. That's what TWSBI says in their literature. I bought my first TWSBI 580L 2 years ago. Before this was public knowledge, over the course of a few months the piston became stiff and I added some of the included silicone grease to help smooth it out. That's understandable. It helped it a little, but the piston remained a little stiff. Of course, now I know why. What should I do? Okay, yeah, so that silicone grease is just not going to stick on there. What you need, and the reason I took this question is because I found out kind of the official answer of what is this white grease that's on the thread here. Let me see. I don't know what the heck. I'm in the mood. I got time, right? I'm actually not running too long on this Q&A. By the way, like the HVAC in office is not working right now. So if I'm glistening, that's why. It's because it's like 85 degrees in my office. My little TWSBI wrench. Okay, so I'm going to pull this sucker out. Okay. See if I can. It's easier to show you the grease when it's not inside the pen. There we go. So we can see the white grease. So the white grease that's on this piston rod is actually wheel bearing grease. Okay, wheel bearing grease, and it's not very much of it. You can get it at pretty much any auto supply store, Advanced Auto, AutoZone, any of those types of things, wherever your auto parts store is near you. The only problem is you're going to buy like an 8-ounce tub of the stuff, and it's going to be enough to last you like 8 million lifetimes worth of TWSBI re-greasings. You know, that is the material that they use. They don't include the wheel bearing grease with it, but that is what you want to do. It's like $6 to get at an auto parts store, so it's not killer, but you're just going to end up with so much extra of it. So I don't know if you can use anything like a lithium grease or plumber's grease or anything like that. I don't know because that's not officially what TWSBI said it is. So you know, but basically any kind of grease that's made for metal on metal contact is going to be what you're going to want to use. So you can pick yourself up some wheel bearing grease. I don't know. I honestly don't know if it's the kind of thing that would be worthwhile for us to carry in the store. I mean, we carry the silicone grease. We have our own silicone grease. If there's like a groundswell of interest in people that want wheel bearing grease for their TWSBI all pistons, it's so few people that would actually probably need that and then wouldn't want to pay the $6 at the auto parts store. And you know, it's a lot of labor for us to like repackage and do all that kind of stuff, so you'd get way less grease, not that you need all of that anyway, and you'd pay probably like $3, you know, so you'd save a couple dollars. I don't know if you think it's worth it for us to do that. You know, I'm always open for feedback and that kind of stuff. It's certainly possible, but you know, I don't know. I'd be interested. Leave me a comment and let me know if you're interested in that. But that is what it is. So now you know. Cool? My question of the week for you all is, what inks do you use that are the easiest to clean out of your pen? Which do you enjoy cleaning out of your pen the most? Curious to know. There you go. That's all I got for this week. You can check out some of what I talked about here on gouletpens.com. I'm going to continue to sweat here in my office as I wrap up this Q&A, but I really hope you've enjoyed this one. I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.